Spielberg, I find quite confused in his recollection of me.
So clear.
I find him to be, unfortunately, not as good at remembering the time that we spent together as I am.
Steven Spielberg threw Julia Roberts under the bus when she needed him most. But this betrayal was nothing compared to what was happening behind closed doors.
I've never had this experience. I mean, I almost feel bad saying that because I don't know why I was spared.
That guilt in her voice, it's been eating her alive for decades. While others suffered, Julia somehow escaped, and she's never forgiven herself for it.
Their artistic dreams, I should say, kind of crumbled. And my dad ended up as a vacuum cleaner salesman, and my mom was a secretary, so.
Her family's fall from grace was devastating. This is the story of what Julia Roberts has really been through. The story started in Smyrna, Georgia, 1978. In a haunting Christmas photograph, 11-year-old Julia Roberts stands beside her stepfather, Michael Moats, her famous smile beaming brightly. What the camera couldn't capture was the fear in her eyes. According to the 2004 biography, Julia, Her Life, by James Spada, Julia feared and despised the man who was supposed to protect her. When her biological father, Walter Roberts, died of throat cancer in 1977, 5-year-old Julia was left vulnerable. 8 months later, her mother Betty married Michael Moats, an antique dealer 11 years younger than her. What followed were 11 years of what Betty would later call the biggest mistake I ever made. Michael Moats was an alcoholic who alternately ignored, pushed around, and denigrated his 2 stepdaughters, according to Spada's extensively researched biography. Eric Roberts, Julia's brother, described their stepfather as a freak who would have stood out in a crowd of 10,000. He told journalists, "Whether he married my mother to get close to her children or not, I don't know. But clearly marrying him was not a good decision. Our mother's husband terrorized and abused me, and I fear he terrorized my sisters Julia and Lisa as well." The abuse, both psychological and physical. When drunk, Moats would engage in raging arguments with Betty and the children, according to family sources. In one documented incident, he slammed Julia's Walkman against the wall in a fit of rage, destroying one of the few possessions that brought her joy. Julia learned early that home wasn't safe. She would often stay over at friends' houses to escape the terror at home. According to multiple sources, the famous smile that would later captivate audiences worldwide was first perfected as a survival mechanism, a way to hide the fear and maintain some semblance of normalcy while living in chaos. Eric Roberts, being 11 years older, was able to move out soon after Betty married Moats. But Julia and her sister Lisa remained trapped in what Eric described as a house where it was dangerous to be around their stepfather. The trauma ran so deep that Julia has never spoken publicly about Moats, despite decades of interviews and tell-all profiles. According to family sources, Julia never talks about him, and frankly, she probably would be happy if she never saw or heard from him again. In 1983, after 11 years of cruel treatment, as Betty cited in her divorce petition, the marriage finally ended, but the damage was done. Julia had learned that the people who were supposed to love and protect her could also be the source of her greatest terror. What Julia didn't know was that her education and family trauma was far from over. Her brother Eric was about to begin a descent into addiction that would test every survival skill she'd learned in that house in Smyrna, Georgia. In 1981, Eric Roberts was at the height of his early success, building what would eventually become a 700-plus film and television career. But behind the rising star facade, cocaine had begun its deadly work. On a night that would change everything, Eric got behind the wheel while high and crashed his car, landing in a coma that lasted 3 days.
So very badly in 1981, I knocked a lot of stuff out of my brain, and it's not coming back. And I finally accepted that after living with it for 30 years.
The casual way Eric discusses permanent brain damage reveals the depth of destruction addiction brought to the Roberts family. When he woke up from that coma, pieces of Eric's mind were simply gone forever. The brother who had helped launch Julia's career, who had been her protector and guide in Hollywood, was fundamentally changed. Julia watched helplessly as the cocaine epidemic of the 1980s Hollywood consumed her brother. Eric later admitted that drugs were everywhere on film sets during that era. Everybody from the executive producers to craft service were high on that drug. But for the Roberts family, this wasn't just an industry problem. It was personal devastation happening in real time.
Well, there was nothing ever negative in my life that was not brought on by drug abuse.
The completeness of that statement is staggering. Eric Roberts, a man who achieved everything he dreamed of professionally, was admitting that drugs had poisoned every single positive thing in his life. But the destruction didn't stop with Eric. It radiated outward, forcing everyone who loved him into impossible positions. Julia found herself reliving the helplessness she'd felt as a child with Michael Moats, watching someone she loved spiral out of control while being powerless to stop it. She tried interventions, confrontations, and ultimatums. Nothing worked. Eric's addiction had become stronger than blood, stronger than the family bonds that once held them together. The breaking point came when Eric's relationship with Kelly Cunningham, the mother of his infant daughter Emma, imploded under the weight of his addiction. A custody battle was brewing, and Julia faced the most impossible choice of her life: support her brother's parental rights or protect an innocent child from the chaos of addiction.
Sister Julia played a big part in making sure that Emma was being raised in what she believed was a very safe and secure environment.
Julia had grown up in a house where a stepfather's dysfunction had terrorized children. She understood firsthand what happens when adults' problems become children's trauma. When Kelly Cunningham sought support in the custody battle, Julia made a decision that would haunt her forever, but potentially save a child's life. Julia chose the child. She supported Kelly Cunningham's custody claim, knowing it meant Eric would lose his daughter and she would lose her brother's forgiveness. The betrayal Eric felt was absolute. In his mind, Julia had sided with outsiders against family. The irony was devastating. The woman who had survived family dysfunction by learning to protect herself was now actively participating in creating more family fractures. For years, brother and sister moved through the same Hollywood circles without speaking. Eric didn't invite Julia to see Emma grow up. He didn't invite her to family gatherings. The relationship that had once been Julia's anchor in the entertainment industry became another source of pain and loss.
We see them having a really great relationship. Your feelings about the relationship that they have with each other, Julia and Emma.
I'm all for it. Are you kidding? It thrills me.
It would take decades for Eric to understand what Julia had done. She hadn't betrayed him. She'd made the same impossible choice countless family members of addicts face every day. She'd chosen a child's safety over family loyalty, knowing the cost would be enormous and the guilt would last forever. But Julia's education in loss was far from over. Hollywood was about to teach her that even professional relationships could be just as devastating as personal ones. And this time, the betrayal would be public, humiliating, and impossible to escape. By 1991, Julia Roberts thought she'd found sanctuary in her work. After surviving abuse and family addiction, her career had become the one area of her life where she felt some measure of control. Steven Spielberg's Hook was supposed to be a career-defining collaboration, working with one of Hollywood's most respected directors in a big-budget reimagining of Peter Pan. Instead, it became a masterclass in how quickly Hollywood can turn on you when you're already down. The timing couldn't have been worse. Julia was dealing with the most traumatic period of her personal life since childhood. Her relationship with Kiefer Sutherland had imploded just days before their planned wedding, with tabloids suggesting infidelity. The press was circling like vultures, turning her private pain into public entertainment. She was emotionally devastated, isolated, and trying to perform Tinkerbell while her world collapsed around her.
There's no doubt in my mind. And he talked more about his personal life. I know more about, him and his life and Amy Irving and what have you than I probably said about my own life. you know. But even that was quite conversational, and that wasn't sort of like saying, oh my God, you're never gonna. It was just, so I find it, I find him to be, unfortunately, not as good at remembering the time that we spent together as I am.
Listen carefully to Julia's voice in this clip. This isn't anger. It's the sound of someone who's been deeply, personally wounded by someone she trusted. The pain isn't about professional criticism. It's about intimate betrayal. Instead of offering support during her crisis, rumors began spreading about Julia being difficult on set. Crew members nicknamed her Tinkerhell instead of Tinkerbell. When the film wrapped, instead of addressing the situation privately or offering any understanding for what Julia was going through personally, Spielberg went public with his criticism. In a devastating 60 Minutes interview, Spielberg said, "It was an unfortunate time for us to work together." When asked if he'd work with Julia again, his response was calculated cruelty. This is a 60 Minutes question, isn't it? The message was clear. Julia Roberts was being publicly labeled as difficult, unprofessional, and unemployable by one of Hollywood's most powerful figures. What hurt Julia most wasn't the professional damage. It was the personal betrayal. She trusted Spielberg enough to confide in him about her struggles, believing he would understand and support her. Instead, he used her vulnerability against her, choosing to protect his own reputation by sacrificing hers. Julia's response reveals the depth of her wound. When she mentions knowing about Spielberg's personal life and his relationship with Amy Irving, she's not making idle gossip. She's pointing out the hypocrisy. She'd been vulnerable and trusting with someone who turned around and publicly humiliated her when she needed support most. The Spielberg betrayal taught Julia a crucial lesson about survival in Hollywood. Even the people you trust most can turn on you when protecting you becomes inconvenient. It reinforced everything she'd learned in childhood about being careful who you trust and always being prepared for betrayal. But perhaps the most devastating part of Julia's trauma wasn't what happened to her directly. It was what she couldn't prevent from happening to others. The weight of being spared would follow her for decades, creating a guilt that no amount of success could heal. Nancy Moats never stood a chance. Born May 19, 1976, to the same mother who had married the abusive Michael Moats, Nancy grew up as the family's forgotten child. While Julia escaped to Hollywood and Eric battled his demons publicly, Nancy remained in the shadows, caring for their mother Betty and trying to build a life that would never measure up to her famous siblings' achievements. The tragedy of Nancy's story is that she desperately wanted the family connection that Julia had learned to live without. While Julia had developed survival mechanisms that included emotional distance in strategic relationships, Nancy remained vulnerable, hoping for acceptance and love from siblings who had their own trauma to manage.
Never had this experience. I mean, I almost feel bad saying that because I don't know why I was spared.
When Julia made this comment in a 2017 interview about sexual harassment in Hollywood, she was revealing something deeper than professional safety. This was the voice of someone carrying survivor's guilt. The constant question of why she escaped traumas that destroyed others, including her own family members. Nancy's relationship with Julia was complicated by both shared trauma and radically different outcomes. Both had lived under Michael Moats' roof. But while Julia had escaped to fame and fortune, Nancy remained trapped in cycles of dysfunction. Nancy struggled with weight issues, working as a production assistant on shows like Glee while living in Julia's shadow. In 2013, Nancy made a desperate attempt to connect with her half-sister by speaking to the New York Daily News about their relationship. Nancy revealed that when she was in high school and Julia was an adult, she would just let her know that she was definitely overweight, and she would make it quite clear to her, in a not-so-nice manner. Nancy's interview wasn't meant to destroy Julia. It was a cry for help from someone who had tried everything to gain her sister's acceptance. Nancy explained that when you're in a family of very, very exceptionally beautiful people, it's intimidating. I think that growing up as Pretty Woman's little sister has definitely made me try to see the person inside and not the person outside. But the interview backfired spectacularly. Instead of opening dialogue, it created more distance. According to Nancy's fiancé, John Dilbeck, Julia and their sister Lisa began excluding Nancy from family gatherings. When their mother Betty was diagnosed with cancer, Nancy's access to her became increasingly restricted. Dilbeck later revealed that Julia always felt that Nancy had her time with their mother. Now it's her turn. Nancy was banned from holiday celebrations at Julia's New Mexico ranch. That final Christmas, according to Dilbeck, Nancy received cruel texts including, "I hope you're enjoying your Christmas in your moat's nest."
So grateful and felt so comfortable acknowledging the luxury of being able to just say, I'm putting this aside for now because there's this moment that will never come again where I will never be a parent for the first time.
While Julia spoke about the luxury of stepping away from work to focus on her children, Nancy was being systematically cut off from the families she'd spent her life trying to join. The contrast is heartbreaking. Julia discussing her gratitude for family time, while Nancy was banned from spending time with their dying mother. On February 9, 2014, Nancy Moats was found dead in a bathtub in Los Angeles, surrounded by prescription pill bottles. She'd taken a fatal overdose of medication, drowning after losing consciousness. Beside her body, investigators found a 5-page note. The note was devastating in its accusations. Nancy had written, "My so-called siblings get nothing except the memory that they are the ones that drove me into the deepest depression I've been in." 3 pages of the note specifically blamed Julia and Lisa for her decision to end her life. Nancy's fiancé, John Dilbeck, discovered her body. In subsequent interviews, he painted a picture of systematic exclusion and emotional cruelty. She would burst into tears every morning because she woke up in her final months. The woman who had cared for their mother her entire life was being treated like an unwanted stranger by the siblings who had escaped. Julia's only public response was brief and clinical. "It's just heartbreak. There aren't words to explain what any of us have been through in these last 20 days. But the damage to her conscience was permanent. Another family member had been destroyed, and this time, Julia couldn't claim she was just trying to protect a child." Nancy's death forced Julia to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes being spared comes with responsibilities to those who weren't as fortunate. Sometimes survival includes an obligation to help others survive too. However, success in Hollywood is often built on the wreckage of other people's dreams. But for Julia Roberts, it was built on the wreckage of her own family's sanity. By 2017, when she sat for that Today interview about Wonder, Julia had achieved everything the entertainment industry could offer. An Oscar, a $250 million fortune, and the title, America's Sweetheart. But success came with a price no amount of money could pay. The constant awareness that she had survived while people she loved had not.
I never had this experience. I mean, I almost feel bad saying that because I don't know why I was spared.
The interviewer had asked about sexual in Hollywood, but Julia's response reveals something much deeper than professional safety. This is the voice of someone haunted by survival itself. The existential question that torments everyone who escapes tragedy while others don't. Why me? Julia Roberts had watched her stepfather terrorize her family for 11 years. She'd watched her brother Eric destroy himself with cocaine, suffer permanent brain damage, and lose custody of his daughter. She'd watched her half-sister Nancy spiral into depression and ultimately take her own life after being excluded from the family she desperately wanted to join. And somehow, inexplicably, Julia had emerged not just intact, but triumphant.
So grateful and felt so comfortable acknowledging the luxury of being able to just say, I'm putting this aside for now because there's this moment that will never come again where I will never be a parent for the first time.
When Julia talks about luxury, she's not speaking from entitlement, she's speaking from profound awareness of how rare her position is. While other working mothers pump breast milk in utility closets, Julia could afford to step away from her career entirely to focus on her newborn twins. While Nancy was banned from seeing their dying mother, Julia had the resources and power to control family access. While Eric struggled with permanent disabilities and financial ruin, Julia was building a $250 million fortune. The survivor's guilt permeates every aspect of Julia's relationship with her success. When she discusses her parents' crumbled dreams in that matter-of-fact way, there's no triumph in her voice, no sense of, "I succeeded where they failed." Instead, there's the quiet sadness of someone who wishes she could have saved them too.
Their dreams, their artistic dreams, I should say, kind of crumbled. And my dad ended up as a vacuum cleaner salesman, and my mom was a secretary. So
this isn't the voice of someone celebrating her escape from humble beginnings. It's someone mourning the dreams that died before she was old enough to help. Julia's success story isn't the typical Hollywood narrative of talent conquering obstacles. It's the more complex story of someone who survived when others didn't, who thrived when others struggled, and who carries the weight of that disparity every single day. The guilt shows up in how carefully Julia guards her family privacy, how intensely she protects her children from public scrutiny, and how she structures her career around family stability rather than maximum achievement. Every choice reflects someone who understands exactly how precious security is because she knows what it's like to live without it. Julia's pattern of supporting other people's custody battles, from Eric's case with Emma to later charitable work focusing on children's welfare, suggests someone trying to atone for being spared. She couldn't save Nancy, couldn't fix Eric's addiction, couldn't prevent her parents' dreams from crumbling, but she could use her survival to protect other vulnerable people, especially children. The woman who feels guilty for being spared has spent decades quietly using her platform and resources to ensure others don't suffer the way her family did. But perhaps her greatest achievement wasn't any movie or award. It was learning how to transform survival guilt into generative purpose. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.